Oral malodor continues to drive people nuts, and it is if not the top reason people get their oral microbiome assessed. Like a saliva test. There's many different, companies out there. Bristol Health is one of them, for instance. If you're a formulator, if you're a brand, if you're a scientist working in this space, how might you address this? Hello again, I'm Dr. Rob alongside my sidekick, and welcome to our show, Dental Formulators Playbook.
So, as you already know, bad breath is something that affects me. You, not so much.
Nope.
But for me, this can be an issue and supports a recent oral microbiome test that tells me I need improvement.
Yeah, even though you eat very healthy and have great oral health, you need to improve your oral microbiome. That's just the way it is. In prior episodes, we talked a bit about supplementing with nitrates or amino acids as one way to help boost your microbiome.
Yeah, I have a spinach salad like almost every day, and that's loaded with nitrates.
Yes, it is.
So, if supplementing with additional nitrates or relevant amino acids like citrulline or arginine may not sufficiently help, what can I do? What can anyone do?
Yeah, great question. Actually, there exists some very popular approaches, though not all of them are effective.
Okay, so I've long been familiar with their breath mouthwash, and this seems to work well. So why is that?
Okay, right. Well, first, because we mentioned a brand, TheraBreath, just a disclaimer, they have not funded anything or contributed to the show. They were just one of the very popular brands
Mhm.
that have come up and everything else. So we're going to talk about them because they really popularized the use of a certain ingredient. And this goes back to 1993 because virtually every bottle says this. It's on the label. Hey, we started in 1993. It's on their website, whatever. So much so, and they've had some really great success that now Church and Dwight owns that brand and they direct its, content, its different versions of the oral products and such. And so I think that they acquired them probably in 2021 or so, if I'm not mistaken. But anyway, it's important. It's relevant to talk about here.
Their breath mouthwash. Okay, so what's the secret? Is there a monograph or guideline that covers this? And what tests can be done to demonstrate efficacy?
Boy, loaded questions here. Okay, I like it. So we got to break these things down little bit by little bit. In this episode, we're going to discuss how it works. In the follow-on episode, we're going to do a deeper dive, some formula forensic style, looking at the TheraBreath, and we'll probably look at Smart Mouth too. One by one, we'll do this.
First, let's start. What is the source of bad breath?
Okay, well, we're going to assume that your overall general oral health is fine, meaning that there's no disease issues. You don't have caries, you don't have like a root canal that's acting up, any kind of endodontic procedure. In other words, you don't have periodontal issues, gingivitis issues, and stuff, and that you probably participate in good oral hygiene. Whereas, do you brush your teeth at least twice a day, for instance?
Do.
But you don't have any food trapped between your teeth for long periods of time, right? This means that there's going to be other factors that are going to drive the bad breath as well. And these are due to anaerobic microbes that might reside on your tongue, maybe on the tonsils, somewhere in your throat. And they produce these volatile sulfur compounds, VSC. We're going to say this a lot, so that's the term, VSC, volatile sulfur compounds.
Okay, and that's halitosis, right?
Yeah, bad breath is generally referred to as halitosis, scientifically speaking. So these VSCs, how do we get them? Well, they're created through catabolism of amino acids, and it's done in the saliva, it's done in blood, it's done in the cells and such. The halitosis, as you mentioned, is very common. Usually it's described as a poor oral hygiene condition. It's reversible. All you need to do is just improve your oral hygiene, okay? That's a technical, scientific approach. Hey, you have halitosis, brush your teeth, whatever. But, a paper reported in 2009 that over 2,000 patients arrived at various dental clinics and they complained of halitosis as being the third most prevalent reason why they went to the dentist. So it's obviously an issue. And even with regular oral hygiene, it's going to be insufficient. So what are you going to do? You have all these opportunistic species. We're going to use the word, remember again, opportunistic. Things are commensal unless things tilt dysbiotic. And then all of a sudden the opportunistics come into play.
So not good or bad.
Yeah, not good or bad, but they tend to be bad. And we call them the ones that are highly influenced. Remember, they're opportunistic. And so what happens is whenever they do create these VSCs, these compounds that are bad smelling, right? Foul smelling, that could do some different damage, including inhibit gingival fibroblast protein synthesis, which is required for good gingival health. So usually if you have too much of this, then you're gonna potentially have issues with your gingiva. Maybe then, I don't know, plaque, gingivitis, things like this. So,
Okay. Okay. So we keep saying VSCs. What are VSCs?
yeah, so there are three primary gases, and this is important gases, not liquids, gases, not solids, gases. And all of them have an unpleasant odor, and some liken it to like rotten eggs or whatever, or garlic breath, right? People understand the garlic breath. Whoa, just rank, right?
Hmm.
So hydrogen sulfide is one. The second one is methyl mercaptan. It's also referred to as methane diol. And then the third one is dimethyl sulfide. So those are the three common VSCs, and
Okay.
those all have sulfur. And that helps explain why things smell nasty, including garlic. The garlic odor has sulfur in it. And if anybody who's ever used or worked with sulfur powder, they know it, whether you make your own gunpowder or explosive, or if you use it as part of your horticulture or agricultural aspects. Sometimes the soil is supplemented with this
Hmm.
depending on whatever the plant is. So that even just regular sulfur powder on its own is off-putting.
Yes, indeed. So this all appears to be well studied. These sulfur-based gases, which the way I say it, they're just stinky, drives halitosis. Every time I eat garlic or onions, which unfortunately I love, and you don't, this only makes my breath smell worse.
Yeah, it does.
So speaking of this, is this a cosmetic or disease issue?
Well, if you clean your mouth, again, brushing, flossing, rinsing, whatever,
Which I'd like
usually,
to clarify, I
yeah,
do.
I know you do. Well, then, so the odor does dissipate, right?
Mm,
Okay,
yeah.
yeah. Well, from that perspective, because it can dissipate, this would appear to be an unpleasant but persistent cosmetic problem. But
Okay.
there are underlying medical issues. So sometimes those with kidney issues, sometimes those with diabetes, sometimes they have persistent breath. Although, unfortunately, it's still considered a cosmetic situation, not a disease state. All that stuff, at least here in the US market, we're going to say
Okay.
it's cosmetically considered.
Okay, so if I understand correctly, this is going to mean there does not exist an FDA monograph
Bingo.
or guideline, right?
Exactly.
Okay, basically meaning there's no recognized quote unquote, as we like to talk about, active ingredient that would address the halitosis.
Right. So we're going to use the term, if we're going to address this, probably a magic ingredient or hero ingredient. Okay. Some
Okay.
people like to use that anyway. What is the hero ingredient? Well, that's going to be our code for any kind of ingredient that has that benefit.
Okay.
We previously talked about CPC, remember cetylpyridinium chloride and chlorhexidine, essential oil combinations. Remember episode whatever, 13, I think it was. We
Hmm.
did formula forensics on mouthwashes that had those.
Hmm.
But they may have some halitosis relevant benefits, but not always. And so, because of that, there's this gap that exists to address halitosis.
This further means there's not really a hard standard for efficacy evaluations or ingredient oversight, right? That's what I'm getting out of
Yeah,
this.
that is exactly right. So, with respect to the FDA, that's correct. There is some guidance for use of certain ingredients for those purposes. I'm thinking of zincs, maybe some sodium chlorite. We're going to be talking about it, but no, there's no regulated monograph for these ingredients that specify which types of studies, duration, groups, all that other stuff. But there are various methods that are still employed, and this has been done. And there's several different testing sites that can do this, and you can do it both experimentally in the lab as well as clinically, including using judges that use their sniffer.
Yeah, that'd be an awful job.
Well, hey, but if you get used to it, right? I mean, it might be just one of those things.
Okay, well, I'm guessing that the clinical evaluations are fairly straightforward.
Yeah, that's right. Usually clinicians are among the measurement sources, but they're usually not the only ones because, after all, that is just a qualitative assessment. Can we get quantitative, right? So the qualitative, usually you have these judges, they have the person breathe in their face basically over the course of 3 minutes, and they judge the foulness on a scale of 0 to 5,
Which
right?
can be
It
subjective.
can be, it can obviously be subjective, but then there's other opportunities to have like a device that you would put in your mouth, kind of like if you have a straw or something, and you can breathe in that over the course of three
Like
minutes.
a breathalyzer.
Yeah, like a breathalyzer, and that would be connected to a gas chromatograph that would be sensitive to detecting not only the type of odors that are coming out, including those three volatile ones that we just talked about, but also the amount of them as well. And they could do that over the course of whatever, like from immediate to 30 minutes, if that's how long you're hooked up to it, or, 60 minutes or whatever it is. So, yep.
Okay, but just to clarify, you said there is no FDA monograph. So, what might a good study design look like?
Yes, excellent question. There are lots of variations on this. We're going to mention one where it's just a 7-day clinical study. But the ADA, the American Dental Association, does have acceptance criteria in order to get the ADA seal. And what they want you to do is do a 3-week study.
Okay. So, is there anything beyond that that they require?
Yeah, they want you to also do, if possible, provide short-term data too. So you have to do 3-week studies, usually independent, 2 different sites, and usually the manufacturer brand can't be too heavily involved, right? Including
Okay.
as an examiner. I mean, they can be oversight and they can maybe fund it, but they can't be the ones actually making the measurements.
Makes
Okay.
sense.
Yeah, it makes sense, but still, there's brands out there not related to malware, but that are still involved and they assess it and they take all of the data and they look at it and everything else. Now, if you're a good reputable brand and there's a history of it, maybe not an issue. But even so, you shouldn't be able to give a pass on that.
Mm.
Anyway, the point is, there are various models you can use, but the ADA does say, look, test against the placebo and have your product and go, 3 weeks. Make
Okay.
sure you have an appropriate sample size. Make sure you have your safety data as well. And usually that 21 day by 21 days, or even if you had a short term model, clinicians, all, the people looking at this, they would know if there's any adverse events reported by the subjects using the product. So that all goes into it, the safety profile, and then of course the
Okay.
efficacy model. So you just have to think about what kind of negative control you'd want to use,
Okay.
you
So
know?
basically, comparing against the negative control, I would think an effective test product should always be better than the negative control, like a sweet flavored water.
Yeah, this is the trick here, right? You don't want that sweet flavored water to have any kind of notes that can mask the malodor,
Ah.
right? Or act against the malodorous entity or those vapors themselves and neutralize them. So you have to be fairly clever about this. So, as an example, Listerine typically likes to use as a negative control, and I know this is usually for gingivitis, but it could probably be applied here. Similarly, they use a 5% hydroalcohol rinse,
Okay.
as a good negative control. Something like that might be a nice thing to do because you're still using something 5% alcohol, still low enough that you're not getting a tremendous benefit and it's not toxic for the person, for the subject using it. That is really what you'd be looking
Okay.
at. But you don't have to use that. You can always use, like, I don't know, maybe a wintergreen, saccharin rinse or something. But the
Hmm.
devil's in the details there. Okay.
Absolutely. So that,
Or the exact product, but lacking the certain ingredients. We'll talk about the TheraBreath
yeah.
one. The TheraBreath one is interesting because although it might have a nice flavor, it doesn't have a great sweetness. So in that particular formula, it might be really easy then to just pull out just the active ingredient, sodium chloride, and use that. So I'm digressing a little bit, but I think that
Makes
this is
sense.
important because people want to know, well, what is the negative control? What am I going to test
What's it
against?
up against?
And it's
Right.
interesting that the ADA, again, doesn't require a positive
Positive
control.
control.
Yeah. So
Only
you're
negative.
setting the bar a little bit lower. You have a little bit more leniency,
Lower.
well, a lot more leniency in trying
Yes.
to, figure out, well, hey, what am I comparing against with the test product?
Yes.
So,
So,
yep.
yeah, those are all good points, but I'm more interested about lab-based evaluations that are not involving people. So,
Yeah,
does that,
you're going to be a
is this,
sniffer. We're going to have you as a
no,
sniffer.
no,
Yeah.
no,
What do I
no,
want to be when I grow up? I want to sniff foul mouths. Yeah.
no, no.
It's either upper or lower. Anyway, okay. And we're going there. So this becomes important. You said lab-based stuff. Research and development activities that assess possible formulations. What can you do? Well, I've seen, variable designs on this. And again, there's not clear dictated patterns. Again, it's not in the federal monograph, right? It's not in the ADA recommended stuff because what the ADA does is they say, well, you have a plan. Why don't you just share it with us and we'll tell you if it sounds good. Okay. I mean, no, but that's how it goes,
I
right?
suppose that's
Yeah.
okay.
And it all depends, right?
Okay.
So there's a lot of freedom here, which is nice from a scientific perspective because then you don't have to worry about if certain products or certain techniques fall out of favor for whatever reason. What if you're using a device that's not manufactured anymore because the company went bankrupt or it got
Okay.
taken over and it was discontinued because of low volume, right? So there's different things. But one thing that I've seen is that researchers will get a bag or a box and it'll be sealed. It'll have ports on it so you can put in stuff. And they'll put in, for instance, 3 ppm of each of those 3 volatile gases,
Okay.
hydrogen sulfide or methyl mercaptan or dihydrogen sulfide. And they'll put that in there along with the formulation that they've devised or a promising ingredient itself take that, shake it up, make sure it
Okay.
mixes really well, okay? And gases, it's easy to do because properties of gases are that they fill the entire room that they
Or space,
exist in,
right?
which is really, again, off tangent, it's pretty remarkable. The room that you're sitting in and breathing in right now is completely filled with that gas. And that's just one of the property differences between a gas versus a liquid or a water,
Right.
I mean, or a solid. But
Hmm.
anyway, another port on that container would actually be connected to another gas chromatograph, a same port, and it would be used to then detect the nature and the amount of remaining gases from that, for instance, 3 ppm concentration.
They shake it
Yep.
all up, and then
Or let it mix. Yeah, that's right. Yep.
they basically access one of those ports, which
Yep.
is connected to this
A gas chromatograph. Yep.
gas chromatograph, and then that analyzes the amount of those gases left.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Yeah. And then, and they could be connected for, up to several hours. You can think about that. It's like 0, 30 minutes, 60 minutes, 2 hours, 12 hours,
Okay.
maybe even 24 hours. It all depends, right? So some of these bottles, they have claims about 12-hour efficacy. If that's not derived from the clinic, it can also be derived experimentally.
Okay.
In the clinic, it's most relevant, of course, but
Makes sense.
still,
Yes.
it could be done. So,
So we covered some experimental
yep,
and clinical techniques.
yep,
And we recognize, or we know now, that this is definitely going to be a cosmetic claim.
yep.
So realizing again, there's no clear quote unquote actives outlined by the FDA for halitosis. So another way to look at it, what are some ingredients that might deliver active like or this magic hero like benefits?
Yeah, so we're going to focus on two in particular.
Okay.
So it's going to be zinc salts, and then it's going to be chloride-based compositions.
Oh, okay. So tell me about the chlorite based options first.
Well, with the chloride, you have two different options. You either have a two compartment where you mix upon use, right? Or, right before use,
Mhm.
or you just have a single bottle. Okay. And like the TheraBreath would be an example of just a single compartment bottle. It's sodium chlorite and or sometimes it's referred to as stabilized chlorine dioxide that will also appear on the label
Okay.
versus Smart Mouth, the two compartment, two phase bottle, which has individual ingredients. One of them might have sodium chlorite, and then the other ingredient will have a zinc salt system. And then you're supposed to mix those together at the point of use.
Okay. So it sounds like there's definitely a difference between the two.
Yeah, and the chlorite, you either have sodium chloride or you have sodium hypochlorite.
Okay, so let's do the I have since I haven't heard of it, do the sodium hypochlorite
Well,
first.
yeah, the hypochlorite, that's just really just bleach. Okay.
Okay.
So that's the easier one. That always requires two-part mixing. You'll have one that's a little bit more alkaline, one phase, and then the other phase will be acidic, and the acids activate that chlorite because it disrupts that molecule and it evolves that chlorine dioxide, but it also evolves some chlorine gas as well. So, that could be a little bit unpleasant, a little bit pungent, maybe make your eyes water. That's a little bit much. That one typically isn't available OTC. That one might be more of a prescription strength,
Okay.
product maybe dispensed from a dentist office. So,
Okay.
but that one is not used as much.
Right, the two chamber one where
Yep.
basically when you combine them, they're one's alkaline, one's acidic. You combine them, the it gets activated by those acids and the gases form, right?
Yeah, that's right. Super potent, man. I mean, you can get some real good kill activity with that one. I mean, think about it. It's bleach, right?
Well, yeah, that's the first thing I thought of. And so, and the user sometimes, I mean, it's done in the office too, but the user would do this at home, then mix those two things and then just don't inhale, I
Just on
guess.
it. Yeah. 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 Mix, but don't inhale. That sounds
Okay. Yep.
sounds
Moving on.
comfortable. Yeah, go ahead.
So I wouldn't like that at all.
So you're
Yeah.
talking about Smart Mouth then, right? Would be the other one. So does Smart Mouth have hypochlorite? No. Although that's a two-phase system that just has sodium chloride. I kind of, already spilled the beans before, but just for clarification, that is not sodium chloride. And by the way, I mentioned bleach. Bleach is usually used in terms of disinfecting, right? And
Mhm.
that's usually for inanimate objects, right? Like
Yes.
like a surface of a counter or a bathroom or something like that. Whenever we refer to things in products that can have any kind of biocide activity, whether that's a bacteriostatic, bactericidal, whatever, we're talking about antiseptic So in episode 13, we talked about
Yes.
Listerine. It said antiseptic on the bottom.
Yes.
You know, if you have something super potent, like a two-phase hypochlorite, situation, that would be considered an antiseptic. Okay. So that does have potent biocidal properties. Sodium chlorite, it also has some potent properties, but they're going to be diminished relative to hypochlorite. And it's because of the nature of the molecules that are evolved. And Smart Mouth then uses the sodium chloride. It's less potent than the hypochlorite, but it still can be effective against malodor species. In that particular case, they activate the hypochlorite from an acidic solution, but they use the zinc as the acidifying agent to help activate it. In other typical hypochlorite dual chambers, they might, maybe the other phase might have citric acid, for instance, in it, which
Okay.
is in itself acidic enough that that can activate the hypochlorite.
Okay. Acid is needed to activate though.
Or something acidic, and sometimes these zinc salts can be a bit acidic, like the zinc fluorides and stuff. Sometimes zinc lactate, zinc gluconate, depending on the manufacturer and what choices they like to use. And are these like hugely acidic? No, they're not super acidic like citric acid, but these might have pHs in the sixes. So it just might be
Just a little bit.
just a little bit. And that's important because at first you get it going, and then there might be other opportunities in mouth where acidic environments might exist.
Okay, so that kind of helps describe why you can have one chamber, but
Mm-hmm.
then also there's dual chamber because they work similarly, but in a little bit different method because of the ingredients, correct?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
So then how does TheraBreath work with a single phase compartment?
Again,
Sodium chlorite.
that's what
I know.
I get to. I was like,
Yeah.
you're telling me that.
Yeah, exactly. So
The
so now you have a single phase and the sodium chloride, how is it activated? That's the secret. And this is the stuff that maybe isn't necessarily told on the label, but it's all part of the brand. It's all part of the formulation. I'm not saying necessarily TheraBreath gets this right. I don't think they do. But again, that's just my opinion. Of course, they don't care about me either. But the point is, I think that there's ways of telling the story and understanding this. So there are acidic environments in our mouth that are readily susceptible, right? And can be
Okay.
used as activators for just sodium chloride.
Okay.
If you have acids, maybe in plaque traps, right?
Yeah.
So if you have orthodontia, maybe there's some, fermentation going on that's resulting in a lower pH. Lactic acid is being produced. Well, that might potentially exist as one of the activators for it.
Okay.
But there's other things too, because the lactic acid doesn't necessarily, address malodor per se. Is lactic acid stinky? Yeah, of course it is, right? I mean, that's like the sour milk and sour cheese,
Yeah.
right? I mean, that's just what it is. And we're talking about breath, we're talking about gases.
Yes. VSCs.
So we got to go back to those. And those are what
Okay.
are acidic. Again, not super acidic like citric acid, but they still have acidic properties. So the pH of those is going to be less than 7. And so hydrogen sulfide, methyl mercaptan, and to some degree dimethyl sulfide, although that needs moisture in order to kind of evoke an acidic arrangement, which in on the mouth, I mean, it's moist.
Yeah.
So it's going to present an acidic opportunity to act as an activator.
Okay.
So you have these acidic gases then coming in contact with the formulation that has the sodium chloride, and that is what activates the action.
That's what you're talking about when you say activation, or
Yes.
it activates.
Yep.
Per se. Okay.
Yep.
So the point of use mixing for Smart Mouth with the two separate chambers essentially activates the mouthwash to produce this chlorine dioxide gas once
Yes.
you put them in the same compartment.
Yep, absolutely. Yep,
dish.
it's the zinc salt that is just acidic enough. Obviously, the formulation might be acidic itself. It has the lower pH
Right.
anyway, so that's going to help. But that's right. So it starts the action and it doesn't wait to contact the malodor. But that's why you have to quickly mix it.
The mixing.
Yeah, you have to mix it and go. So yeah, mix and shoot. So if you're going to take your time, you're going to spill too much, whatever going to be the case.
The gases and
Yeah, exactly. Well, no, well, yeah.
No, I'm just kidding.
Well, from the hypochlorite, yes, of course, right?
Okay.
Yeah, so that is how it's done.
Okay.
So,
For those who only use a single compartment, and there are several
oh
of
yeah,
those kinds,
there's several.
they basically use the sodium chlorite by itself. So tell me how that becomes activated then.
Yep, is through the VSCs. Those are acidic
Okay.
gases, and they contact with this. Sometimes the ingredient, instead of sodium chlorite, sometimes they'll say stabilized chlorine dioxide.
Okay.
But that's all it is. Now, some companies, including TheraBreath, again, I'm mentioning a lot of them. I mean, I swear we're not, I don't have any vendetta against them, and they're also not supporting us.
You can support
but
us if you like.
yeah, yeah, but they were just, but
Just kidding.
look, but yeah, but they were just an originator, right? And they actually referred to their active ingredient as Oxide 8 at one point. They don't do that
Okay.
now. We'll address that, but
Okay.
yeah, I mean, that's what they did. But you
So
know,
we're talking about these ingredients, the sodium chlorite
yes,
or the stabilized chlorine
yes,
dioxide.
yep.
Are either of those defined for use by the FDA?
Yeah, sometimes they point to it, and the FDA does not specifically say, hey, look, you can use sodium chloride for oral care preparations. Oh, no, they don't do that. They do have 8 distinct use definitions of sodium chloride, and any interested listener can actually check out Part 173.325 of the Code of Federal Regulations to learn more.
Okay, you always give us great information about where to find things. That's awesome, but I'm not understanding. You said those 8 don't refer to oral
Oral hygiene use.
hygiene
No.
use.
So the first use, for instance, I'll just give you an example. It's for the generation of an aqueous, acidic, sodium chloride solution, and it's made acidic by the use of a generally recognized as safe grass acid, organic acid. So that would be the first use.
Okay, so that again, that's an aqueous acidic
Yeah, I know.
solution,
Yeah,
right?
that's right. That's right.
So, what does that definition specifically speak to then?
Well, not the dose. So there is no definition on in terms of amount of levels. In one of the other definitions, it actually talks to it. And the second definition then speaks to an acidic composition that actually has between 500 and 1200 ppm of sodium chloride.
Okay, I'm trying to follow. I'm sorry.
So that's another an acidic aqueous solution, right?
Okay, right.
But another definition specifically speaks to poultry processing water.
So, seriously, for chicken carcass.
Mhm.
Again, what does this have to do with oral care products?
Yes, in fact, all the definitions actually refer to meat processing of some kind or food contact substances.
Again, nothing specific.
No,
Hair products or cosmetic products in general.
no, not in the Code of Federal Regulations. So I think that the acceptable range probably for oral care products, again, if it sounds crazy, if you're lost a little bit, of course, because it's not clear in the FDA
Yeah, I'm
Code of Federal
bouncing
Regulations.
ball.
Now, some researchers will just broadly point to it. Sometimes they do that. They're like,
Okay.
hey, this does this or this does this. And then they go silent on it. And then they're like, well, it's in there. I see sodium chloride. Yeah, but you don't have context. And you have to infer from this. And this is where there's often a gap. We're going to address that in the next episode where we talk about examples because researchers are absolutely clueless sometimes. Absolutely clueless. And, you have to infer. You can't just say, this isn't a memorization thing where it's like, hey, okay, we have to do this. For certain monographs and especially whenever companies get creative, okay, where the creativity comes in. And then as things get grandfathered in, as rules change over time, things really get muddled. So all of a sudden you have grandfathered,
Yes.
existence of products that maybe were in effect
Right.
prior even to a proposed rule for a monograph for any kind of drug product. And so then you kind of have to accommodate everybody a little bit. I mean, that's what, it's hard, right? It's hard to get everybody on the same page. So sometimes the treatments actually predate what the actual issued levels are, or sometimes it's just not important. How many people do you think are at the FDA are really concerned about, chicken carcasses getting clean with a little bit too much more chloride? And
Probably not.
where's the extension to going to, hey, we need to have this for oral care? And by the way, because there is rules by the American Dental Association, this is one of the reasons why the FDA and the ADA don't always see eye to eye.
Okay.
ADA wants more out of the FDA. FDA says, hey, ADA, back off a little bit. Or if you're so inclined, you pick up the slack. But then the ADA does, but then you don't have to use necessarily positive controls all the time in certain acceptance criteria for certain claims, right? So
Don't make it too difficult.
yeah, so each time we put our foot in the pool, it's going to be disrupted and you're going to see
Yes.
those circles of disruption in that body of water every time we do that. So this is just another one of those cases. And so what we can do is we can look for insight. And so if the monograph for meat processing sprays or solutions to help clean off the chicken guts or whatever say you can use between 500 and 1200 ppm, that's maybe not a bad starting point for some of these companies saying, hey, look, maybe
I mean, the chicken goes in your
maybe
mouth, right?
yeah, exactly. Well,
So,
yeah, hopefully not raw,
no,
I
no,
mean,
no, no.
cook your chicken.
Yes,
Good
definitely.
grief, I can't
Okay,
believe we're talking about chicken and cooking.
we're gonna move on.
Nobody wants to get poisoned. Oh
So let's go
goodness.
the question though, because you gave a range.
Yeah,
What level of this sodium
yeah.
hydrochloride or sodium chloride?
Chlorite. Mm-hmm. That's
Okay.
right.
What level is there demonstrated efficacy against all these VSCs?
Yeah, so we can talk about this, okay? I know we're getting tight on time here, but we can talk about this. So there's one particular paper that was published by researchers out of South Korea. This was done in 2014, they published in the Acta Odontologica Scandinavica, and it compared, I actually tried to have a different kind of feel to that, if you notice. It was a little bit
I
more,
did.
refined and distinguished, right?
I didn't.
So anyway, but the whole point is they compared chlorine dioxide, meaning sodium
Sodium
chloride,
chloride.
against zinc chloride and chlorhexidine solutions.
Okay, yeah, zinc salts. I forgot about that as well. So what did they find?
Yeah, so this is a nice study because it kind of brings us back to the zinc salts. How
In-
effective are they really,
Indeed.
by themselves? So this was a lab study, but they found that those three malodors, those three VSCs that we talked about earlier, right? They were significantly reduced when treated with 0.16% sodium chloride,
Okay.
a little higher than the 0.12% or 1200 ppm, but it's close enough, right? It was very good. In contrast, the 0.25% zinc chloride and the 0.1% chlorhexidine, yeah, they only reduced about 30% of the starting, oral malodor amount, even by the end of, and that was mostly immediately, and it kind of persisted over 30 minutes and 60 minutes. But the 0.16 wiped it out immediately and it stayed wiped out for the full 60-minute time period whenever they
Okay.
were looking at this.
So if I'm hearing correctly, sodium chloride had a way better effect.
Yeah, in
The
fact,
zinc
yeah.
was kind of
Yeah,
okay.
zinc and the chlorhexidine were kind of similar. They really didn't
Okay.
have a tremendous improvement, right? It only reduced the volatiles by 30%.
Hmm.
And it kind of saturated. It's not like it had a sustained effect over the next 15 minutes, 30 minutes, 45 minutes to an hour. It didn't have any. It kind of just plateaued. It was like, okay, that's it. That's done. You're only going to get this level of efficacy, which means that there's a mechanistic difference here and that
Yes.
there's some fundamental issues. And again, we talked about these malodors having acidic properties, right? And
Correct.
sodium chloride is very responsive to acidic
Okay.
species, whether that's, the gaseous kind of species or if it's an actual acid that's present in,
Which is why it's a great
like a liquid, like a
ingredient to
solution, which
do
is
this.
why it's a great ingredient.
Okay. So which of the VSCs were most susceptible?
Yeah, so I think that's really important. So they looked at the 0.16 level, and that was the highest that they tested, but they also tested one 10 times weaker, so at 0.016%. And they found that, the 0.16 obviously was most effective. The methyl mercaptan and dimethyl sulfide were both reduced from about 1,000 parts per billion initially, they had each that, down to zero upon initial contact.
Like immediately.
Yeah, like immediately. And the hydrogen sulfide was the only tough one that they had, that had any kind of resistance to
Mhm.
this kind of acid, but it still reduced 90% immediately and then went to zero by 30 minutes and stayed zero at 60 minutes.
So that's very effective.
Yeah, super, super
Okay, so
effective.
that was the 0.16 level.
Yep.
What about the lower concentration of the 0.016?
The reductions there weren't as great as the 0.16, okay? Everything went zero by 60 minutes. In fact, by 50, it was 50% reduction for both the dimethyl actually, the dimethyl sulfide was reduced by 60%, not 50%. And then the other two, the hydrogen sulfide and the methyl mercaptan, they were reduced by 50% within immediate exposure. But again, by 30 minutes, everything was wiped out except for 3% remaining of the methyl mercaptan.
So that's still really effective. Why does such a lower amount work so well?
Again, you're having gases. Gases actually are most responsive to any kind of reaction. So I
Okay.
think that that's one of the differences. Like zinc solutions, you're talking about a liquid and there's going to be resistance there. There's going to be issues with substantivity and dilution.
Okay.
Just gases. in general that just exist, they don't have as great a sensitivity to those substantivity or dilution effects like a more condensed phase like liquids or solids. And so, because those volatiles are gaseous
Right.
A and then B, because they're
Okay.
acidic, it can really respond to that sodium chloride so easily.
So it sounds like, if you're telling me the sodium chlorite basically reacts almost immediately with these
Almost immediately upon
VSCs.
contact. Yeah, think
Just
about and just think about the marketing that you could do with that. I mean, we've seen some clever marketing. Sometimes they say powered by oxygen or oxygenated stuff or
Well, I'm just picturing this green little gaseous thing, and as
yeah,
soon as the sodium chlorite comes, it's
boom.
like poof, it's gone.
Yeah,
And those
exactly.
gases are the source of the bad
And that
breath.
is the source of the bad breath. Yeah, because
Okay.
once that's done, I mean, there's only so much catabolism of the amino acids that is already in our mouth, right? I mean, and then, you're eating, you're
Okay.
drinking, and then you're cleaning your teeth anyway. So it's going to go. But if you wake up in the morning and you still have some residue for whatever reason, because you
Hmm.
have an anaerobic environment, you have things on your tonsils, whatever, knock it out with some of this stuff.
Makes sense. So
Right?
clinically, I guess this has been observed since there are several brands that carry the ADAC,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, and I mentioned earlier in the show that I was going to talk about a 7-day study.
Yes.
This is where I'm going to talk about it
Okay.
because although the 21-day studies are obviously effective, I mean, just look at those products that have the ADA seal. And by the way, it's not just like TheraBreath. I mean, Procter and Gamble has one. Heck, even generic brands for like Meyer or Walmart, like the Equate brand, they also have an ADA seal. In my view, it's almost like the ADA seal for that is low bar. Okay, you just have to be better than a placebo, right?
Okay. Yeah.
But sometimes, do it well. Does everybody trust the seal or even look for it? No. I mean, sometimes that's like, that's old, right? Everybody wants something new. What's new? What's new? Tell me what's new. Tell me
Mhm.
what's going on, right? And do we really trust all that? Maybe not.
Right.
Just because I see ADA seal doesn't mean that I inherently trust it. Although I do believe that, if a company went to that effort to do all of that
Yes.
testing, to put their stuff in front of a panel to say, hey, look,
Yes.
yeah, and then pay the money, yeah, I'm sure, I would have more trust in that. So anyway, let's go back to the 7-day clinical
Yes.
study. It was published in the journal called Trials, and it was by Shinada and colleagues. I think this was based out of Japan, and it was published in 2010. And they only wanted to look at short-term use of sodium chloride, and they wanted to look at malodor, but they also wanted to look at the plaque index and the gingival index as well
Okay.
as some of the microbial species. So they wanted to see just how good is it. I mean, is this a potential anti-plaque?
Okay.
Or
That makes sense.
anti-gingivitis treatment as well? Like, why not? Why doesn't sodium chloride have this kind of indication, right? Why isn't it
That
listed
makes
in the
sense.
monograph?
Okay. So, and that actually appears very consistent with the lab studies that you just talked about.
Yes, that's right.
Okay. So which supports the idea, which is a better support of the idea that sodium chlorite is meant for malodor, not for plaque or gingival reductions? Is that basically what that lab
Yeah, all these
ultimate?
assays, yeah, and this is what they were trying to find, right? So they did this assessment and they didn't find any difference in plaque index or gingival index or microbial account, save for one species, Fusobacterium nucleatum. That's
Ah,
the one that
CPC.
Yeah, CPC
CPC
struggles. Yeah,
always do.
CPC really does struggle against this. If you do a kill time assay, for instance, anybody out there who's done this, you take your standard CPC rinse, maybe point oh 0.07, okay? Don't do it 0.1%, the highest level, and then say, hey, it had a benefit. The 0.07% is modestly at best effective against that single species in a kill time assay. And there is interest then in trying to get that species because sometimes it's referred to as like a red complex. It's like one of these late colonizers that come after the streptococci colonize an environment, right?
Okay.
There's some other in between species that come, they serve as linkers
They're in the process.
or then, yeah, something that's maybe more involved in the disease. And we talked about that with the
Right.
microbiome. Fusobacterium is one of those that is a late stage colonizer, maybe as a mid stage too. I mean, it's not, again, we can't just have black or white. Why? Because all these species are opportunistic.
And
Most
there's
of them,
that many. There's so
there're
many.
just so many. I don't want to say all of them, but I would say a majority of them are opportunistic. Well, what is everybody else doing? Is the environment acidic? Okay, we got to adjust. Or is it
Right.
more alkaline? Okay, we got to adjust. I mean, they're living things. They're responding to their environment just like we do,
Right.
you know?
So it sounds like there might be an opportunity that would exist to maybe take this sodium chlorite and combine it with maybe a CPC and to
Yeah, potentially.
address some things.
Yeah, potentially. We might look at that in future episodes for sure. The combination of those two, it's not always easy. And one of the reasons is because CPC is very reactive. The availability of that molecule can be significantly inhibited with some of the other ingredients that are found in some of these other mouthwashes that have
Okay.
sodium chloride.
Okay.
And those are things that we'll be talking about definitely in the next episode.
Okay, so this is really important. This is kind of cool. There's an interesting strategy here too. I think what we're going to do next is formula forensics again,
Yeah,
right?
that's right. So we'll be looking at a couple different formulas all around the sodium chloride. We have to know what is going on. But know that even going back to that 7-day clinical study, yeah, malodor was accomplished with sodium chloride.
That's awesome.
Statistically significant relative to the negative control. So we already know on some of these bottles, 24-hour bad breath control. Well, it works for 24 hours, it can work for 7 days, and it can work for 21 days. Those are important metrics. Those are great milestones that if you're a formulator, brand, researcher, goodness, a researcher, and you're trying to understand this stuff, are you comparing against a brand as part of your development efforts? You know where, what criteria you need to meet if you think you have a potentially successful product.
Makes sense.
Short, mid, long term, whatever be the case. Anyway, all right, but we'll save formulas for next time.
Yes.
As for now, this concludes the show. Thank you for listening. And again, with Dr. Rob, and that's me, and of course, with my lovely assistant, my wife, we are very appreciative of your listening. If you have any questions or comments, ideas that you want to have us address, again, reach out to us, okay? We don't mind. It kind of helps us, and I think that this is great. Thank you for listening to Dental Formulators Playbook.
Thank you.